Okay, guys, so the Progressive Era was a time of widespread political relief across the United States. The time frame was around 1900 all the way to the 1930s. The main objective of the progressive movement was to eliminate problems caused by industrialization, urbanization, immigration, and corruption in the government. This time also included laws to enforce segregation, lynching parties, and the Great Migration.
The early 1900s was a very low moment in relationships between the different races of the United States, despite the efforts to create a biracial political coalition which only made segregation stronger. Democratic politicians claimed that poor blacks were inferior to poor whites, which made blacks seem like a threat to society. By driving this wedge between them, it was harder to create labor unions, which was the ultimate downfall of many attempted unions.
Because blacks weren't able to vote, they couldn't stand around and watch Democrats make segregation laws to keep the nation divided. By the 1930s, due to segregational seating, blacks found it impossible to stay at nice places such as hotels, restaurants, and parks.
1880-1930, more than 300 blacks were lynched by Texas lynch mobs. These lynchings were celebration to more than 10,000 whites for the lynching of Jesse Washington.
Okay, so most blacks live in rural areas. They worked as tenants and farm laborers, and then black women had to work alongside the men in the fields for 10 hours a day. And then once they got home, they had to do more household chores while the rest of their family rested from the day's work.
Once cotton prices dropped, many blacks chose to move to more urban areas to get away from poor farm conditions. Many moved outside of Texas, choosing to go north, which is referred to by historians as the Great Migration.
Religion was the main way blacks attended community events. This was done through their segregated churches, which were mainly Baptist. Without these churches, there would be a lot of missed opportunities for jobs in blacks, education, financial help for those in need, and social events for them.
30s, black illiteracy percentages were at 13.4%. Black students were in school for 106 days, but white students were in school for 131. Black teachers made $91 a month, while white teachers made $121 a month. Most black schools were a one teacher, one classroom setup, and the average cost spent on a white student's education was 3 times more than a black student.
Okay, so it starts in August of 1929 when the stock market was growing so rapidly, which caused so many people to want to buy into stock. So it went from millionaires to janitors, teachers, farmers, anyone who wanted to. But between August and October, product was thinning out and employment was already going down. And so if you come over here to the graph that I've drawn, then you can see demand was all the way up here by 1929, but supply it wasn't being met. It was thinning out too much. And so only so far, so many people could get the supply needed. Okay, so we have a bit of a jump in years, but from 1929 to 1932, unemployment was on the rise. 1 in 4 people were unemployed, which meant no one could buy food, no one could put any money into the market or the economy, which means that's why we have the Great Depression. And so President Roosevelt decided to do something about it. He created Federal Emergency Relief Admin, and that was given $500 million to feed everyone and give everyone money for food and give the farmers money to make the food that was needed. So between this winter and that winter, if he had not done that, there would have been a lot of deaths, a lot of malnutrition, which was already happening, but especially during these winters, they needed it. Okay, and then we move into 1933, Public Works Admin. A Public Works Admin was made so that everyone could get jobs back. No one would be jobless if they didn't want to be jobless. So by the end of 1939, 922 jobs were completed or at least started, allotting for over $1 million in public funds. Okay, now we're going to move into a certain group that was affected and decided to thrive through this time. So between the beginning of this all the way to 1932, malnutrition happened, which starts with African Americans. Many died because of this, and so between this time, it was tragic. But they decided once FERA decided to join in, they moved into celebration. Now this included music, sports, and writing. These things were made segregatedly, but still, they decided instead of just focusing on that they couldn't hang out with other people who weren't like them, they were going to still celebrate, still have fun, no matter who tried to stop them.
During the time period, segregation still occurred, but they did not allow it to prevent them from celebrating. Andrew Foster created the Negro National League. The team toured the South. Jack Johnson was the best-known sport person and had the heavyweight boxing crowd during the early 1900s.
Another way people expressed themselves during this time was through writing. Their main focus was self-help and racial uplift. The newspaper writers catered to the African American community and opposing
Rather
segregation.
than falling deeper to despair, blacks actually thrived and celebrated life instead. They did this through celebrations, often making the music themselves. Scott Joplin was seen as a pioneer of ragtime, time, rhythm, and greatly influenced jazz later on. When creating music, Louis Armstrong looked to Joplin's pieces for inspiration.
Y'all are too close. I need to back up.
Rather than deeper,
Through self-help.
black students were in school for 106 days, but white